I'm looking at all 4 of the games from the final round of the Tata Steel Masters that featured the 5 joint leaders going into the final round. I come to the last one. I've already recorded the others. So last game, Nodirbek Abdusattorov against Alexander Donchenko. Now, 2 rounds before the finish, Abdusattorov was leading, but then lost in the penultimate round. And it looked like heartbreak again. He almost won in 2023. So he had a big chance in the final round to redeem himself. He was playing against Alexander Donchenko, who, well, of course, strong player, but, not doing so well in the tournament. 4.5 out of 12 going into this final round. So could Abdusattorov win this final game to join the other players in the lead? An open Sicilian, okay, good start if you want to play for a win, and a Najdorf. And Abdusattorov had prepared this very curious move, Queen d3, but it is really aggressive because very often White prepares queenside castling after bishop g5 and castles. But, you can send the game in different directions with this move. Okay, knight d7. Okay, this looks very logical to me to be able to potentially hit that queen. Bishop e2. Okay, that means that the queen can sometimes switch across the board and doesn't have to worry about knight h5, for example. g6. Yeah, why not bring the bishop out that way? Bishop g5 and bishop g7. So in the past, castle's queenside has been seen in this position. But Abdusattorov very quickly played f4. And this is just a little bit different to usual. Knight c5 hits the queen. So Donchenko was thinking, well, he thought for 17 minutes over knight c5. So, well, that's what you want. In a way that shows that this curious move, queen d3, has paid off. If you get your opponent to think for such a long time. And already, yeah, it feels like White has kind of straightened out pieces and looks pretty good here. If you castle queenside, you might go for e5. You could also play for f5 as well and bishop h6. Donchenko played knight e6, and actually I think this is a good idea. White has to exchange because these two are threatened. But that's straightened out Black's pieces. And now we've got a position which looks kind of like a classical dragon, actually, in the old Karpov system with bishop g2 and bishop e2, bishop g5 and bishop e2. But Black's pieces look pretty good here. Now, which side is White going to castle? Pretty dangerous to go queenside in this case when the bishops are pointing like this and there's the semi-open c file and moves like queen a5 happen very quickly. So Abdusattorov thought for 5 minutes and played the prudent castle's kingside. But basically we've got a classical dragon on the board. Rook c8 looks very logical. Rook d1, okay, watch out for e5, so queen a5. Now an important move, king h1. White should avoid a queen exchange. Queen c5 played. It's well known that these kind of Sicilian positions are very comfortable for Black. You get very easy play on the c file, and you've got a nice solid pawn structure here. So really important to avoid a queen exchange. So queen f3. Yeah, by the way, if the queen goes to d3, then Black, I think, would probably seize the chance to play bishop c4, or perhaps castles first and then bishop c4. And after queen f3, bishop g4 anyway hits the queen, and now back to d3. So it's shuffling, but it avoids exchanges basically. h6. Now Abdusattorov thought for around 19 and a half minutes over this next move. He was probably considering some sharp lines after this. This is a forced sequence, and now white can actually play knight d5, and this is really tricky position actually. But he went with bishop h4. An exchange on e2, queen h5. Donchenko still offering a queen exchange. As I said, endgames are usually very comfortable for black in the Sicilian. So Abdusattorov keeps the queens on with queen e1, defends the bishop. And now castles is possible, but knight g4 starts to get very tricky. There are all kinds of interesting things going on here with g5 and the bishop is opened up. So rook d5 hits the queen, g5. I mean, no wonder the players, had to think for some time over these moves. It's starting to get really sharp, very sharp position. So, this is looking to open up that H file. I mean, something like this, I can't imagine is terribly good for white with the rook, with the H file opening up for the rook. So bishop g3. And, I mean, there are quite a few interesting moves here for black. You could put the queen back, you can take here and go knight f6. But e6, I mean, that, in a way, is the most ambitious move because black wants to win material. I mean, the rook could drop back here, but Abdusattorov plays, really aggressively, taking on d6. Pawn takes pawn. Now, if bishop takes pawn, then black can take here and bishop e5, and black is winning. That happens really quickly. So rook takes f4, bishop e5 anyway. But Abdusattorov had prepared this and played rook takes knight. Very tricky. So queen takes rook will be met by bishop takes bishop, and that's winning. But bishop takes d6. And, I mean, this is a really interesting moment in the game. Well, okay, I'll take a little break. You have a think. I'll have a drink of my tea. How would you play with white in this position? This is a fascinating moment in the game, actually. And Abdusattorov takes a massive risk at this point. Okay, cheers. White play. He simply played h3, protecting the rook. But he's now a clear exchange down. He could have played, for example, queen d1, protecting the rook, hitting the bishop. And after bishop takes g3, he wins black's queen. But this position is roughly level. I mean, I don't think white risks too much in playing like this. But black is also okay in this position. I think one of the problems is it's difficult to bring that knight into play, into a really aggressive position. So that's why Abdusattorov played h3. He's just looking for more, basically, but it's incredibly risky. I mean, the computer thinks that black is better here. But it's a tricky position because black's king obviously stuck in the middle, can't castle. And the great thing about h3 from white's viewpoint, even though, yes, black should be alright here, is that at least white's king is very secure. It has a nice square on h2. And the rooks are split. That's a problem, of course. So rook f8 played. I mean, maybe he's thinking of pushing with f5, but bishop f4. And here is well, I think Donchenko, I don't know about goes wrong. That's a strong statement. But plays a move which I think suits white very well. Let's put it like that. Gives white more chances. I think black has to just hold steady here. You know, with either rook c6, rook c4. But it's a tricky one when you can see that your opponent's queen is coming down to a7. So I understand why Donchenko played bishop takes knight and then queen c5. He wants to shut out white's queen. More than that, he's actually damaged these pawns. However, this bishop is now an incredibly strong piece. So let's see. Bishop e3, queen takes c3. I can understand why Donchenko wanted to do this. But watch what happens. This is very, very difficult for black now. If you play accurately, you can probably hold, but it's really not easy. Donchenko snapped off another pawn. Queen takes c2. Of course, he would be very, very happy to go into an endgame. Queen f6. Abdusattorov, of course, keeps the queens on the board. And notice that pawn on h3. Everything is protected here. And the king just has a safe square on h2. So h3 was actually really prescient. A check from Donchenko and queen d8. So, of course, you want to drive the queen away. Queen b2. Queen dips away. Still holding this rook here. It's not... You know, black has to be careful about that. Queen c7 check. Now, of course, you've got to be a little bit careful about where you put your king. What you do here, well, clearly Abdusattorov felt that it was a mistake to bring this back. I mean, there's no check on c1 for the moment anyway, but anyway, he played bishop f4. Queen e7, so that protects those dark squares. And rook g3, so that just enables the rook perhaps to swing across the board. Even though black is a whole exchange up here, it's incredibly difficult to actually break out from this position. The rooks aren't connected. You know, they would love to be able to challenge that white rook. King is hiding behind that shell of the pawns on f7 and e6 and has plenty of cover at the moment. But again, how do you break out? And this bishop obviously, you know, has a free run on these beautiful dart squares. I mean, maybe, you know, it's best just to play something like this and just to sit tight for the moment and gradually try to creep forward. It's not easy. But Donchenko played f6. I think it's a very understandable move. Perhaps you can plug some of those dart squares. You want to shut out that bishop. But there is a massive drawback with f6. It weakens the 7th rank. And after bishop h6, in fact, black is in desperate trouble. Well, you can just imagine what might happen if the rook moved up. Then rook g8 is fatal. So rook c5. I mean, in a way, at the moment, you know, black wouldn't be too worried if white took the exchange. But, of course, you can just hold that until the right moment. So queen d4. Now this is getting serious. Rook g7 is a very serious threat. So, for example, rook h8, rook g7. That looks fatal. The queen has to look after the rook and queen f8, queen d7. So this is pretty nasty. Nice centralization with queen d4. e5. A check. So this probing is very nasty. You can't play queen d7 because white exchanges and the rook drops. So king d8. And now actually white can win by taking on f8 and just playing queen a3. with the idea of pushing the h-pawn. And black is so tied up. I mean, just trying to defend all the pieces, break out of the pin, defend the king. White has a beautiful initiative there. But it's interesting, Donchenko was so short of time here, and actually Abdusattorov got really distracted by it. He said afterwards that, you know, he was basically watching the time, watching Donchenko's time tick down to sort of 2 seconds, 2 seconds, and he made his final move. And then 1 second on the next turn. And actually that distracted him. He had enough time. So instead of playing the winning idea, this and pinning with queen a3, he played queen b3. And actually after rook e8, black should be okay here. But rook f7 played instead. Mistake. And Abdusattorov found a beautiful idea. Bishop d2. So the bishop switches back, switches round the other side. It doesn't get in on this side, but comes to b4 and cuts black from the left-hand side. So white is now winning again. Really interesting variation. Donchenko played rook g7 here. I just want to show you another move, which is absolutely fascinating. Let's look at rook c6. So this avoids this potential pin. Now white has an incredible way to win in this position. Rook g8. And after king c7, so what you've got to watch out for bishop b4. That's nasty. So therefore king c7. Okay, over to you again. White play and win. There is only one move that wins in this position, and it's a beautiful idea. Really beautiful. I'm very grateful to my computer for showing me this idea, but it's fantastic. It really is. What's the only move for white to win? The move is this. Are you ready? Rook a8. Fantastic. The idea is this. We want to check on a5. Now if the king moves that way, then something fatal is going to happen. But after the check on a5, of course, b6 is going to come. And that's why the rook came here. The rook goes to a7. And there is absolutely no defense to this idea. So for example, queen d7, bishop check. If the king steps up, well, there's probably more than one way to win. Don't know. Anyway, rook d8 is fatal. b6 and rook a7 wins the queen. Fantastic idea. But that didn't happen. Rook g7 played. A check. Nasty enough. So if the king moves, then you can take the rook and take on c5. So rook c7. Pin and win. Exchange on g7 and bishop d6. This is a winning move. King c8. I mean, this is the best that black has. Take here. Now, don't play the king and pawn endgame. You take on f6. So white is a pawn up, and this is good enough. a5. Check. Okay, now the pawn endgame. h4. Black has to stop the pawn. So king d6, h5, king e7. Now, don't play g4 because b5 will actually win for black. But we play a4. So that's the important move. Now, the only way for black to prolong the game is by breaking with b5. But this leads to a queen and pawn endgame where you can see white has two extra pawns. Queen d8 is important. That stops the king slipping out with king g5. And, well, it's always tricky to finish off when you're really tired, but you just have to make sure that there isn't a perpetual check, and there isn't here. So the game finished like this. Now, if you could remove the black queen from the board, then that would be stalemate. But you just can't do it. And, well, there's basically no defense, no decent defense to queen h8 and mate. So efficient technique at the end from Abdusattorov. Wow. I mean, again, what an extraordinary game. And Abdusattorov showing just fantastic ambition. I think for me, a key moment was when he played h3 in this position. So he's the exchange down, and he finds a way to just make life difficult for black. Absolutely brilliant. And then, yeah, there were ups and downs later, but yeah, he found some amazing moves. I love this idea of switching back with bishop d2. Fantastic. Now, that meant that 4 players shared first. So we have Abdusattorov there, Gukesh, Giri and Wei Yi, all on 8.5 out of 13. So they went into a tiebreak, 2 semi-finals. Gukesh and Wei Yi battled through to the final. Wei Yi won that 2-game blitz final, 1.5-half. I don't want to show you any of those blitz games. I mean, it was all a bit random. It was just a fantastic tournament. I hope you've enjoyed my coverage. If you have, if you want to thank me, then, well, like, comment, share and subscribe. And you can always throw me a donation as well if you want to hit the PayPal button, or you can support me on Patreon as well. There's going to be more coming on the channel very soon. And anyway, thank you all of you for viewing over the last couple of weeks. Tata Steel Tournament really is the best classical tournament. Thanks for watching.